Hello, everyone. So, welcome. We're going to be doing the bouncing ball exercise today. And the bouncing ball exercise is great because, it kind of encompasses a few different, I guess you could say, departments into one exercise. So, we're going to be doing a little bit of asset development, a little bit of rigging, and animation, of course. So let's get started. So I'm here in. I've got Harmony, the save create new scene menu open, and so what we're going to do is we're just going to go through setting up our scene properly. So it'd be good if all of you work off of the desktop. So make sure you're working off of the desktop, and what we're going to do is we're going to save our scene. So we'll go to our location here first, and we'll go browse, and I'm just going to find my desktop, and on my desktop I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, and I'm just going to call this folder I'll call it Brad BB assignment. Okay, and Brad BB assignment, you can call it whatever you like. And within that folder, I'm going to select that folder, and then within that folder, so you can see I've got that folder on my desktop here now, and then within that folder I'm going to name my scene first name underscore last name. So Brad underscore McLeod. No, that's not my last name. McLeod. Ball. Okay. 0_01. So Brad McLeod Ball 01. Okay. So this is the naming convention that I would like you to use. Please use this naming convention. Okay. It's part of the assignment is proper naming of your file. And I put a 01 at the end of it. I would like you to use indexing. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So make sure that you, again, your first name, last name, ball, 01. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're set to HDTV 1080p 24. Okay, and that's going to give you a screen resolution of 1920 by 1080 at a frame rate of 24 frames a second. Okay. Alright, so that's fine. We can go ahead and say create scene. So that's how I want you to save your scenes. Okay. Harmony's taking a second here. Okay. So there we go. So you can see at the top of my screen I've got Brad McLeod Ball 01. Okay. And if I open up Windows Explorer and I go to my desktop, you can see where are we here? Brad BB assignment, and then I've got Brad McLeod Ball 01. So you're going to have your bouncing ball assignment folder on your desktop, and then within that folder you're going to have your first name. You're going to have saved your scene folder in that folder, and it'll be called first name, last name, ball 01. Okay, so just to be clear about that, I can see it's properly saved up here. That's good. So why did I put a 01 in front of my scene folder? Really important. This is called indexing. So the way I would like all of you to be saving as you're working throughout the course is you're going to call your initial scene this name, underscore 01. Okay, and after about 10 or so minutes, that's going to be up to you how much you save. I say save more, and you're do more saving if you can. After about 10 minutes, you're going to go to 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, some increment of time. You're going to go to File, Save As, and then you're going to say 02. Okay, so you're going to do a little bit of work. You're going to save, and then you're going to do a little more work. And that's beneficial because if, for instance, you're working and your file screws up or it corrupts or something, you can always go back to the previous index or previous indice and start up from there rather than losing all of your work. So don't just keep saving over your file. Don't do that. Okay, make sure you're indexing. So you're going to do a little bit of work, then save it as 02, do a little more work, save it as 03, do a little more work, save it as 04, so on and so forth. Okay, so just so we're clear about that, just needed to get that out of the way. Okay, so let's start with the bouncing ball exercise. So what I'm going to do, I want to make sure that a couple of things are sort of available to me in the interface. If I'm in my camera view here, I want to come over to my drawing layers. So I've got my overlay layer, my underlay layer, my color layer, my overlay, my line layer, my color layer, and my underlay layer. Okay, so I'm going to leave this on line layer, but if you don't have these available to you, I'd like you to go up to Edit and Preferences, and then in Preferences I'm going to come all the way over to the Advanced tab, and then you'll see Support Overlay and Underlay Arts. Arts. Arts, I don't know why they pluralize that. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. Support Overlay and Underlay Arts. Just make sure that's clicked. Okay. And then you say OK. And then you should see all four of these available to you. So that's important. Just make sure that's available to you. And what I want to do is I'm going to be working primarily right now from the node view. So I'm going to make my node view much bigger, okay? And if you don't have the node view, you can always go into any one of these panels. I suggest the bottom right hand panel, and you can just, you'll see the plus sign here, and you can just click the plus sign and you can find the node view in there, as well as many other menu windows. So there's the node view. You can click that and it'll bring up the node view. So once you have your node view up, I want to make it nice and big, not too huge, because I still want to be able to work in my camera view here. Okay, so here's my node view. Another thing that I want to do is I want to come up to my color tab. Okay, so I'm going to find my colors, and if you don't have your colors, again, you can go to the plus sign here. I can click my plus sign and I can find color, okay, and that'll bring up the color menu here. So what I very often like to do is I like to, when I'm starting a scene, I like to click the minus sign here saying remove color, and I'm just going to get rid of all of these and clean it up, and then I'll say plus to add a new color, and I'll just create custom colors. So the first color I want to make is I'm going to say we'll say ball line. Okay, and then I'll double click in the color swatch, and then I'm going to go to my multiple wheel mode here. I'll click this button and I can just easily see, it gives me more of a sort of a better selection of color. I like this menu a little bit more, so I can just click and drag down here to select black. So I want a black line, and I'll close this. And I'm going to add another color, and I'll call this ball midtone. So again, what we're doing right now is we're just setting up our colors so that we can create our ball, because we need to design our ball asset. So my ball midtone, and I'll, for midtone, I'll click, and I'll pick like a nice, I don't know, like a nice fairly bright blue. Nice and saturated, just like that. That's cool. And I'll create another color. And I'm going to call this ball. I can say ball contact shad for ball contact shadow. And then for this, I'll just make it sort of a desaturated, darker version. Okay, something like that. Maybe a little more color in it. Maybe I'll add some more ultramarine blue into it. I don't know, something like that. Okay, so my ball contact shadow. And then I'll create another color. I will call this, will be my ground shadow. So I'll make this bluish, but a little more gray. That. So I'll call this not ground shadow, ground shad. Okay. And I'll create another color. I also need, this will be my color for my cutter object. So we're going to talk about cutters in a bit, but we'll just type cutter. Okay, so cutter, and I'll double click. And I'll just make this like a lime green. Lime green is a good color for your cutter objects. It's just, it stands out. It's a very, you know, I mean, you can pick your own standards if you want, but lime green is a good standard for a cutter object. So we are going to be, I'm going to explain what color cutters are in a bit, but we need a cutter object color like that. And then for now, I think we're okay. I think, oh, one more color. Sorry. We need a highlight for our ball. So ball, okay, not ball highlight. Highlight. Come on, Brad, spelling. Highlight. Sounds like some premium, like a German beer or something. Yeah, highlight, yeah. Ball highlight. So for this, we will we'll just pick like a white or something. Okay. So we have ball highlight, not height light, and we have our ball line, our midtone, contact shadow, ground shadow, and cutter. Okay, very good. So we're ready to go. That's enough colors for our palette. Very nice. And so now we're going to come to the node view, and let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to make sure that all of our, so this is the node view. If you're not familiar with it, we've got this is basically where we can construct an entire scene. So very handy tool, and we're going to be working in the node view. So what I want to do is, here is my main composite node, and this is where all of my assets would be fed into. So I'm going to click my main composite node, and I want to set this like I want to set all of my composite nodes. We'll talk about this in a bit. I want to set my composite node here to pass through. So the way I can do that is I can open this up, and I can call this, I'm going to call this main comp. Okay, under name. And then the mode, I'm going to switch this to from as bitmap to pass through. Okay. Now, why am I doing that? Well, essentially, it's going to negate Z depth, and it's only going to use the order in which the other assets are plugged into the node. So I just want to make sure that this is only using, it's negating Z depth, and it's just really using the the information that goes into it, kind of like an organizational folder. Okay, so main comp, we have this set to pass through. Okay, all right, and we got our first drawing layer here, and you can see that over on the left hand side that, you know, this is my drawing layer. This node is a representation of the drawing layer in the timeline view. Okay, so I will use this drawing layer later, but I'll rename it to, I'll probably just use it for animation. So I'll call it anim1. All right, and I can just close this. So I'll kind of put this aside. I don't really need to use this right now because I'll sort of use it later, probably just for my rough animation. Okay, so let's get started with building our ball in the node view. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say Control H to create a new composite node. So again, a composite node, it's a way to compile different other nodes together. So I'm going to go ahead and immediately set my composite node to pass through. So I'll click my options box here on the left hand side, change it to pass through, and again what that does is negate the Z information, and it's just really going to use things as an organizational folder to you know, comp things together and keep them organized. And then the name that I'm going to use for this is, I'm going to say ball comp, and then I'll put a 1 in front of it. Okay, always put a 1 in front of all your names. That's just best practices when you're working in a software like Toon Boom Harmony, Autodesk Maya. Use 1 because you might, you know, in case you never know, you might have a duplicate of something in your scene, so always put a 1 in front of all of your assets. Okay, so whatever the name is, _1. So we have our comp here, so let's start building our ball using our comp. So I'm going to create a new drawing layer by hitting Control R. Okay, so here's my new drawing layer, so Control R for that, and I'm going to call this ball 1, and I'll just hit enter. You can say add or add in close, or you can just hit enter to add it, and then I'll just hit close to close that menu down. So here's my ball 1 layer. So on my ball 1, really all I'm looking to put is my main line art and then the ball midtone, and then we're gonna, you know, use other layers to build our contact shadow and the highlight. So here's my ball 1, and I'll take this and I'll plug it into my ball comp. Okay. Okay, so on my ball 1 layer, so I want to make sure that I have this selected, and I also want to make sure that I have my line art layer selected. Okay, so I want to come up here to the layers menu and say set line art as current layer, so make sure that that's set. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my ellipse tool over here, and then once I have my ellipse tool selected, I want to go over here to tool properties on the right hand side. If you don't have your tool properties up, you can go to the plus sign here again and then find tool properties in the menu. So I've got tool properties open, and again, make sure that you have the ellipse tool selected, and I'm just going to come down until I can see these tools, these buttons here, and I want to uncheck the autofill button here, or untoggle the autofill button so that it's not filling with it's not filling the ellipse. So also my cursor is showing like a do not pass sign, or a I can't, you know, cannot do anything sign. I can't remember what that's called. If I come up to my display menu here, and I set this to display all, it'll then allow me to draw. Okay, so that's what that issue was. So just say display all. Okay, and then I'm just going to click and drag a line. Oh, I have, so right now I'm gonna say Control Z because I have the wrong color selected. So I have my ball midtone. So I want my ball line color selected, and I'm just gonna shift click my ball line color. You know, so my line, that's cool. That's a good size for my line there. Okay, so I have that ellipse drawn. I'll do that one more time. So I'm gonna shift click. Okay, holding shift, I'm gonna click so that I have a nice circular ellipse. Okay, so that's there. Very good. And then I'm gonna come over to my color art layer and click that. Okay, so I'm on my color art layer, and I'm going to go to my selection tool up here, and I want to select my ball. Okay, and then with my ball line, and with my ball line selected, with the ellipse selected, I want to make sure that this has a paint stroke on it so that I can then color it. So if I come over to my tool properties, okay, and again, make sure that you're on the selection tool and that you've selected your line art. Come over to tool properties, and under operations, I'm just going to click this button that looks like two sheets of paper with three arrows pointing downward. It says create color art from line art. So if I click that, okay, it doesn't look like anything's happened, but you can see that if you hit the K key, you can see that there's a blue line running through the ellipse, and that just signifies that now this has a paint stroke and I can fill it with a color. So with that done, I'm going to make sure that I'm on my color art layer, okay, because we want to paint using our color art layer. I'm going to come over to my color tab, and I'll grab my mid-tone color. Okay, so that's this baby blue, and then I'm going to go to my paint bucket, and I'll fill that by clicking in the middle of the circle. Okay, my ellipse. And then I can hit the K key again. If I hit K, I can make that paint stroke invisible again. Okay, so we've got, very good, we've got our line art of our ball, and we've got our ball filled in with our midtone. So we're on our way. So we've got what we need in our ball one layer. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my ball shadow. So the easy way to do that is I'm going to say Control R to create a new drawing layer, and I'll call this ball shad 1. Ball shad 1, and I'll say add and close. Okay. So ball shad 1, and I'm just going to plug this into my ball comp, and I want to make sure that it's on the left of my ball comp so that it's showing up in front of ball 1. Okay, so the layering order on any comp node is from left is the topmost and right is the bottommost. So I want my shadow to be on top of my ball layer. Okay. So what I'm going to do is simply select my ball layer like this, and then with my selection tool, so the hotkey for the selection tool is Alt S. Okay, so you can either click your selection tool or you can say Alt S, and I'm just going to grab all of this, and I'm going to say Control C. Okay, I'm going to make sure I copy that, and then I'm going to come to my ball shadow layer, and I'm going to say Control V, and that's just going to paste everything from my ball layer into my ball shadow, and then I'm just going to hide my ball 1 layer because I don't need to work with this anymore. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come down to my ball comp layer here. So my ball comp, and I'm going to plug this into my main comp. Alright, and what that's going to do, you can see that when I did that over on the left hand side, I can now see my layers in the timeline view. So what I want to do is actually, I want to hide my ball 1 layer because I don't want to be working with it right now. I'm going to hide it. Okay. Okay. And in fact, I'm going to open this up. I'm just going to make sure that the ball 1 layer is hidden. You can I just want the ball 1 layer to be hidden. And the way you know something is hidden is in the node view it goes red. And what you can also do is you can grab any element and you can say D or A. So A is to show and D is to hide. So show, hide, show, hide. So I'm going to keep this hidden right now because again I don't want to be working with anything on the ball layer. I just want to work on the ball shadow layer. So again, if I hide the ball shadow layer, you can see that because I copied everything from the ball 1 layer over to the ball shadow layer, it's showing that layer now. So I'm going to keep this open and I'm just going to select all I want is the line. So I'm just going to click inside the ball shadow and I'm just going to delete the paint in the middle. Okay, so I'll do that one more time. I'm just going to click in the middle and I'm going to delete the paint. And then I'm just left with the line art on ball shadow. And you can see if I hide that, right, I know that that's all I'm working with. So make sure that you're only working with the stuff on the ball shadow layer. Okay, so I've got my line art here and I'm going to select my line art again. Okay, so again I'm going to select the line art on the ball shadow layer and then I'm going to create a new paint stroke with this by going to tool properties. Okay, so I'm going to create another paint stroke because this needs a stroke. I can't paint it yet. I'll just click on that to make sure there's a paint stroke. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to my color menu and again making sure that I'm on my color art layer. So there's the C here. I'm going to make sure I'm on the color art layer and then I'm going to go to ball contact shadow. Okay, so I'll just make sure I'm on that color and then I will fill, oops, sorry, not there. I need my paint bucket. So if I come to ball contact shadow, go to my paint bucket tool just like this, I'm just going to click in there and there you go. You've got your colored ball with the contact shadow. Okay, and now I actually don't need the line art on this because I'm just using this for the shadow. So I'll grab my line art and I'll delete it. Okay, so here's my ball shadow. Okay, and I've got my ball. And my ball shadow is sitting on top of my sphere. You can see that. Okay, so that's there. Very good. So we have our ball shadow, okay, which is sitting on top of the ball layer, and we've got our ball layer underneath it. Very good. Okay, so with both of these visible now, what I want to do is I actually want to create what's called a cutter for my ball shadow, because I need the ball shadow. Obviously if it's covering the whole thing, it's not going to look like much of a shadow, or it will look like a shadow but too much of a shadow. So I want my ball shadow to just sort of cover the bottom half of the ball. So I'm going to use a cutter to create that effect. Okay, so a cutter is just like a mask. That's basically all it is. So if you come into your node library, so the node library, It's over on the right hand. Well, if it's not in the right hand side, you can bring it up anywhere. You can have it in your timeline. So pick a window and click the plus sign anywhere you want, and you can go to your node library. Okay, so I have 2 of them open now, so I don't need 2 of them open. So I can close. If you ever want to close a tab, you can go to any tab you want and just right click it and say close. Okay, just a little pro tip for you there. Okay, so in the search bar here in the node library, the search bar up here, you can say CUT and it'll find the cutter node. So I'm going to click and drag this down into my node view. Okay, so there's my cutter. Very good. And I'll make my node view nice and big. So the cutter, how does this work? So the cutter it's a masking tool. So if we zoom in here, we're going to take a look at how the cutter kind of works. So there's 2 ports on the top of the cutter. The port in the middle here with the dot in it is the port that you're going to put the object you want to have cut into. Okay, so the object that you want to cut is okay, so it says image. Okay, so whatever we want to cut, which is our shadow, we're going to put that shadow into here. This port on the left hand side is the matte port, or I like to call it the mask, same thing, mask port. And you can see there's a little mask here. That's going to be our masking object. So what I'm going to do is draw another ellipse to use as a masking object and then plug that into this. Okay, so I'm going to take my cutter and bring it over to the side until we are ready to use it. So let's draw another ellipse using our color art layer. So we're going to make sure we're on our color art layer. And I'll go to the ellipse tool. Okay. And then under tool properties, I'm going to turn on autofill. Okay. So with that, all that set, again, ellipse tool, tool properties, turn on autofill, and make sure you're on your color art layer, and make sure that you have your cutter color selected. So select your cutter color, which is the lime green here, and then I'm just going to draw a nice big ellipse about like that, and shift click and drag, obviously, because I want it to be nice and circular. And then I'm going to take my cutter object and pull it over top of my ball. Okay. Oops, wait a second. I made a mistake. Sorry about that. Before I do that, I actually want to put this on my a new layer. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new drawing layer, and I'm going to call this mask. Mask 1. Okay, so I'll add that. So I created a new layer for my mask, and I'm just going to plug this into my ball comp on the left hand side there, and I'm going to make sure that I have my cutter color selected. I'm going to go to my ellipse tool, and then with my ellipse tool I'll make sure I'm on the color art layer here, and under tool properties I'm going to make sure that I have my autofill button selected, so that when I create an ellipse, I'll click and drag an ellipse onto the screen. I've got a nice big ellipse like this. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of my cutter object and I'm going to just position it over my ball. So I just want it to be covering the top of the ball like this. And what I'm kind of thinking of is I want high noon lighting. I'm gonna make my lighting like really simple. Okay, so just high noon. So again, like the shadow, you can see it's gonna cut the shadow like this, so it's creating sort of like a high noon lighting coming down like this, and that's on my mask layer. Alright, and I can actually grab the line art of my mask layer. So if I just grab the line art and I delete that, okay, alright, so there's my mask. It's in place. So as I said, the cutter object needs two things. It needs the object I want to cut, which is going to be my ball shadow, and it needs the mask. So what I'll first do is I'll take the cutter and I'll click and drag it over holding the Alt key. Okay, hold Alt and click and drag it over until it boop just connects itself like so, and you should see the ball shadow just piping itself into the image port there. And then I'm just gonna take the mask and I'm gonna plug it into this port and watch what happens when I do. There you go. And it's cutting through my ball shadow. Cool, huh? Alright. So we've got our ball shadow and we've got our mask. And now we need a highlight. So, because our ball's looking, you know, it's looking okay. But you know, remember your job as an animator. One of your jobs is to sell. You know, always be thinking dimensionally. You want to have nice form and shape in your objects. So, you know, we are well on our way to having that, but we need a highlight. So we're gonna put a highlight in there. So I'm gonna create another drawing layer. I'll call this ball highlight 1, and I'll say close, and I'll just plug this into the leftmost side because the leftmost side because I want this to be on top, on the topmost arrangement. Okay, so here's my ball highlight, and on my ball highlight layer I'm going to click this and make sure I'm on the color art layer. I'll just grab my ellipse tool and then go to ball highlight, and also just make sure that I'm autofilling. So I do have that selected, so I can come in now and I can just click and drag some highlights onto the ball. We'll just do some fun highlights. Yeah, that's cool. Cool beans. Okay, cool. So now I've got a ball that looks dimensional. Okay, we've got some nice highlights, we've got a shadow. Alright. Great, fantastic. So now what I can do is, now that my ball asset is ready for the rigging process, I'm just going to drag these parts over here. And one other thing I'd like to mention to you also, you've got your ball 1 layer here, which has, your ball 1 layer has line art. Okay, we drew our line art on our line art layer, and then we also drew our color art on our color art layer. So those were drawn. English, Brad, come on. Those were drawn on my ball 1 layer. So the way I can sort of access those later, a really handy tool to access those later if I want, two things are my line art node and my color art node. So if I go into my node library and I type line, it's going to bring up my line art node, and I can click and drag that into here. Okay, and then I'll type color for my color art node, and I'll click and drag that down here. And what I can actually do is I can pipe the ball 1 into the line art node, And I can also take the ball 1 layer and pipe it into the color art node. All right. And then I can actually feed these either into another comp or just back into the comp like so. And I want to make sure that my line art is on the leftmost side and my color art is on the right side. Okay, I want my line art to be above my color art. And these are kind of neat because, you know, you can use these and access the color art or the line art later if you want. So let's say, you know, you wanted to put a glow onto the color art of the ball. You could actually, you know, we could find a glow node. This isn't part of this glow node isn't part of the assignment, but I do want you to have your line art nodes and your color art nodes piped through your ball, or your ball art piped through your line art and color art nodes, and then back into the ball comp. Okay, that is a part of the assignment. Okay, because I do want you to know how these can work. So you can, these allow you to access your line art and color art. So let's say I wanted to take the color art and add an effect to it. Well, I could take a glow node and put it below the color art, and this actually, if I click into the properties of the glow node, you can see that I can actually start to change the color of the ball. I can actually make it glow, or I can use it. I can say use source color, which it'll just use the color of the ball. So let me do that again. So I'll delete this glow node, pull it down here, and then I can click and drag it holding Alt. Okay, and I can say use source color. Then I can change this to a radius of, I don't know, 10 or something. Alright. And I'll just hit X. And if I render this, you can see that it's actually making the color art glow. So that's kind of cool. You know, 20, right? So just a little FYI. I'll go back to my OpenGL view. So that's, you know, these are really handy. So have your ball 1 layer piped into a line art layer and a color art layer, and then the line art layer should be arranged on the left hand side of your color art layer. So line art layer to the left, color art layer to the right. Okay. So I do want you to have those in the node view. Okay. So I'm just going to get rid of this glow. Don't need that. Just using that as a demo. So hopefully that makes sense. And let's do a little house cleaning here. I just want to make sure that this is another part of the assignment. Make sure that your nodes are nicely arranged. So just line them up. Okay. Organize your nodes nicely. Don't want to have overlapping wires. Okay. So this looks good. And I'm just going to take all of this and I'm going to drag it to the right. Okay. Alright. So we have our ball pretty much ready to rig. Alright. So let's start setting up our ball for animation. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we got to do is we need to make sure that all of our drawing layers are set to use the parent peg pivot. So we'll get into that in just a minute, and we'll explain the context behind that. So, but what I want you to do is I want you to come to all your drawing layers. So we'll say ball 1 first, and we're going to click into the menu on the left hand side, the options box, and then under the transformation tab you're going to come all the way down to drawing pivot, and it'll say use embedded pivots. Okay, so I want you to come in here and set all of your drawing layers to apply embedded pivot on parent peg. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to use the parent peg's pivot. Okay, and we're going to talk about pegs in just a second. For those of you who don't know what pegs are, we will get to that, but just come in and grab all of your drawing layers under the transformation node, and drawing pivot, use embedded pivots, set this to apply embedded pivot on parent peg again. Okay, and we're just going to rinse and repeat. Okay. Okay. So I've done that for all 4 of these. So now that that's done, we're gonna start rigging up our ball for animation. So let's talk about pegs. So a peg is essentially it's like a pin that you put into a drawing or an object, and it allows you to pivot from that pinpoint. Okay, you know, it's like putting a thumbtack into an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of our drawings and we're going to parent them under a peg. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to select all of our drawings by saying Control and clicking. So we're going to hold Control and click all of our drawing layers. And then we're going to say Shift P to parent them under a peg. So Shift P, and there we go. We have a peg here. So if I have my peg selected, so I'm going to go ahead and select my peg, and I'm going to say Shift T. Okay, again, that's over. Shift T is just going to the transform tool. So here's the transform tool. You can click that, and when I go to the transform tool, you can see that it's my ball is in a sort of this manipulator box that I can then squash and stretch it from. I'll say Control Z to undo that, but you can notice that there's this blue dot in the center of the ball. Okay, so that is the ball's pivot point, and if I come to the corner of the transform tool and I rotate it, you can see that it's actually rotating from that pivot point. I'll say Control Z to undo that. But this is where my ball is pivoting from. So this first peg that we've created, I can pivot from, I can rotate from that point, and I can also move from that point. So this first peg that I've created, I'm going to use this first peg to control the squash and stretch of my ball. Okay, so if I'm going to be squashing and stretching with my ball, I want to squash and stretch from down here, not from the center or in some other place. Okay, I'm going to do a save as. So before we go ahead, I've been a bit of a bad boy. I haven't saved, so I'm going to go to File. I'll say Save As. Make sure you're going to Save As. Okay, so Save As, and then I'm just going to select one of these and then rename it to 03. I'll call it 03 because I've done enough work now that I want to save. And in fact, you should be saving more often. So really save like every 10 minutes. There's absolutely no problem with doing that. The standard sort of motto in the industry is your hard drive space is cheap, but your time is not. Okay, so always remember that. Save often. So I've got my peg here, and I want to change the pivot, this little blue dot. I want to change that position. So the way that I would change that is I would come up here to my advanced animation tools. If you don't have your advanced animation tools, like if you don't see those up here, you can just click up in the menu anywhere and say advanced animation, and then those will come up. And with my advanced animation tools up here, I'm going to click the rotate button, and I'll change this by, if I mouse over this blue dot, you'll see the cursor goes to a crosshair, and I'm going to click and drag it down to the bottom of my ball, just like that. Okay, so now my pivot's there. That's good. And if I say Control T again to go to my pivot, you can see that I'm now pivoting, squashing and stretching from that point. Okay, so I'll undo that. Okay, so that's good. So this is going to be my squash and stretch peg. So I want to rename this. So I'll click my options box, and I'm going to call this SS_P_1. So that's SS peg 1. Okay, and I'll say close. Alright, so SSP1. So now I also want a separate peg to be able to animate my movements on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my SSP, my squash and stretch peg, and I'm going to say Control P again to parent that under another peg, which I'm going to use for all of my movements. So this peg, I'm going to make sure I'm on the transformation tool here by hitting, I can hit Shift T or click the transformation tool, and I'm going to reposition this peg to the center. I'll just make sure that it's on the center of the ball, just like that. Perfect. So now I'm moving from that point there. And so I have this peg up here. I'm going to rename this to Move P1. Okay. Move P1. So this is where I'll do all of my movements from. Okay. So these two pegs are what I'm going to be animating from. Okay, you're going to animate using your pegs. You're not going to animate your drawings. You're going to animate using your pegs. So I can come here, you know, I can move the ball around, and then I can also place keyframes on my squash and stretch peg. Okay, so we have some variety in how we can key this. And that's really helpful to have two separate pegs to be able to, you know, use as separate controller objects. Being a person who's also from CG animation, I have a CG animation background as well. So being I worked as a technical director for quite a number of years, and being a rigger in 3D, you know, you always want a lot of controllability, and it's kind of the same thing, you know, in any rigging sort of workflow, is that you want to have enough controllability to be able to key things on key things separately. So that's why, you know, having the move peg and the squash and stretch peg is really going to help you fine-tune your animation. So we have these two separate things that we can animate on, but we also need another peg that's going to be used as what you would call a God node that you can block and stage your scene with, that we don't animate on. Okay, so I'm going to grab my move peg and I'm going to parent that under another peg. Okay, and I'm going to rename this to, and call this Ball Master 1. Okay, ball master underscore P1. Okay, signifying that it is a peg. And there we have it. We've got our ball master peg, and with my transformation tool selected again, I'm just going to reposition my ball master, and I can just put it at the center. That's fine. So I'll put this at the center, and there we go. Okay, so this peg, this ball master peg, we're going to use to, you know, scale and block our scene. You know, we can block our ball wherever we want, and then these two pegs we're going to use when we're actually animating. All right. Okay, so that is pretty much it. We are ready to animate our ball. Okay, so we've got this all set up very nicely. Okay. Yeah, so we're pretty much ready to animate. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of like, you know, I can leave my ball wherever I want, but very good. You have set up your ball, you've designed your ball, you've set up your ball for animation because you've done some simple rigging with your squash and stretch peg, your move peg, and your master peg. So we're going to stop the video here, and we will pick it up again very shortly with our animation session. Okay? Very good. Stay tuned, and we'll be back.